Okay, we are live.
We're good to go? Okay, awesome. Well, hello everyone and welcome back to our third discussion about healthy relationships. My name is Bradley Burris and I'm the Prevention Education Coordinator for People Against Rape. And my pronouns are they, them, she, hers. Last week, we discussed skills and techniques that we believe are critical in establishing healthy relationships. We went over how to initiate a relationship, the importance of setting boundaries and having healthy communication, the way to have an open conversation about future sexual encounters, how to assess your safety throughout a relationship, and to recognize when it is time to end one. If you have any questions about these skills, please contact us or refer to part 2. I'm now going to have the experts introduce themselves. We'll go ahead and start with Tanel.
Hi, welcome back. As you all know, my name is Tanel Jones, and I am licensed as a marriage and family therapist and addictions counselor, and I am the health educator for the Empower program.
Thank you, Tanel. Brittany?
Hi, I'm Brittany Green. I am the follow-up victim advocate for People Against Rape. My pronouns are she, her, and hers.
Thank you. Sydney, you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Sydney Conrad. I'm the Director of Education and Training for My Sister's House.
Thank you. And last but not least, our special guest, Anaj.
Hi, I'm Anaj. I'm the community youth expert.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being here. So this week, we wanted to show you how to use these techniques that we keep talking about. We're going to go through each topic we've discussed and role play typical situations you might encounter. Each expert has picked scenarios that they think best explain how to implement these skills. Then at the end of our examples, our youth expert, Anaj, will ask the experts some questions that they believe are the most pressing to youth today. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Tanel, can you explain or show us how to assess our values, what the relationship Bill of Rights are, and how we can initiate a relationship?
Yes. I'm just getting connected here. 1 second. Okay. Okay, so let me just pull up my little PowerPoint real quick. Oops. Okay, I just want to make sure everybody can see the screen. And so building healthy relationships, what are my relationship values? So one of the things you can do first is to identify some things that you feel like you are going to need in your relationships. Your relationships can be, again, these can be with your family, your friends, any type of intimate relationship that you want. So if you have a couple of moments, just go ahead and circle a couple of things that stand out to you. And as you're circling, I also want you to know that these are relationship needs that's for the entire relationship. So you are thinking about, you want to be this type of person, or you want to be this way in this relationship, and you also want the other person to exhibit similar behaviors or characteristics as well. The second thing that you can do before you consider having a significant or intimate relationship with someone is to ask yourself, what do you want to, or who do you want to be in this relationship? So what personal qualities do you want to bring into play about yourself? Those can be things like, do I want to learn, do I want to be empathic? Do I want to make sure I'm having patience? What character strengths do you wish to develop or exhibit? And then how do you want to act on an ongoing basis within this relationship? And then what do you want to stand for as a partner? So if it's all said and done, what do you want to, how do you want people to perceive you in this relationship? And are you able to do that? So those are some really important things to consider when you're about to start or initiate a relationship, especially if you've gone out a couple of times with this person and you're finding that they may be interesting and you want to see where this goes. These are things to talk about. And I encourage you all to talk about it to yourself, maybe jot these down, but also talk about it with the person that you are interested in, because again, their answers might sway you to consider whether or not this is something to even pursue. In saying that, as you all know, if you've ever been in a relationship, when you first meet a person, it's hard to kind of stop and do these things because you have all these neurochemicals, your oxytocin and your vasopressin are really high, your dopamine levels are high. And so that's why everything feels really, really good at first. And then once those level off is when the real work comes in and you have to decide, well, is this person really right for me? Because it felt good 3 months ago. Now it feels like really, really hard. So it's very important to try to do this early on, even though everything feels really, really good in the beginning. And once you've done that, even before, you want to think about how do you create your relationship bill of rights? So as you're doing that, you want to make sure you declare that you have the following rights in an intimate relationship, but also recognizing and respect that other people are always entitled to those same rights. So what would be some relationship bill of rights? For example, you have the right to be free from abuse, any type of abuse in a relationship. You have a right to choose when you want to be sexual or intimate in a relationship. You have the right to have respect. Again, I would define that if you can. And you have a right to end a relationship when you feel comfortable. So for those of you that may be watching, just take a couple of minutes right now, or moments rather, and write down 3 relationship bill of rights that you find important to yourself. Good. So let me stop sharing my screen. Okay. So those are just some things that you can do before you get ready to start a relationship, or maybe, like I said, you've just met somebody and you're like, oh, this might be the person. Do it for yourself first. Then also make sure you are doing it with that person as well, or at least asking them, have they thought of these things for themselves, and what are these things that they've thought about, and how do they see the relationship going? And again, like we said last week, it's okay to recognize that some of these things may change and shift as the relationship evolves, as you as a person continue to grow and work on yourself. It's also important to recognize that these things may change. But I also want to go back and caution everybody to look at where from the young people, think about, again, what we talked about last week. What is love? Why have you defined love that way? And what experiences in your life has taught you about love? Because you could be bringing those experiences into any new relationship that may be impactful. So really think about that and recognize that no matter what experiences you've had of love, growing up or in your childhood or family, you don't have to, if they're negative, you don't have to bring that to this new relationship. So learning how to break free from those patterns, which is very, very difficult. But I will tell you, as a person who works with couples, the biggest thing to work through is effective communication and really learning how to do that. But both parties have to be willing to do that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Janelle. And I do have a question. For people who are trying to initiate like a professional relationship, whether it be, work, or, you're asking for a mentorship, just something that's not so intimate or, love-based relationships, how can we apply, those Bill of Rights that we were talking about before to those?
Yeah, so again, I would say be mindful of who you are, know your strengths. When you are trying to initiate a relationship, recognize what you bring to the table, whether it's through a mentorship relationship or a professional relationship. And so again, and ask yourself, what do I want to get out of this? You know, I do a lot of helping people feel comfortable, like loving the work that they do. I do some consulting on that. And so a lot of that also has to do with understanding why you're drawn to this work or why you want to do the work that you do, but being able to celebrate your own strengths. Sometimes if you go into a work environment thinking that people are supposed to give you affirmations or validate you're doing a really good job, and that doesn't happen, it can be very hard. So when you set those Bill of Rights up, you might want to say, one of the things that I have the right to do is to celebrate my own wins. You don't have to wait for your supervisor to give you these atta girls or atta boys or atta persons. You know, do your own 6-month evaluation without waiting for your employer to do it and sign off on it. So just that's one thing. And most importantly, you have a right, you can write on your Bill of Rights that you have a right to be respected in any work environment. So that's also important, especially with a lot of different things going on. If you don't feel heard, if you don't feel like you're getting respect, then making sure you know how to go about, you know, addressing that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tanel. So we're going to move on to Brittany. Can you demonstrate setting boundaries and healthy communication for us?
Absolutely. So I did want to start off by showing a graphic. And this will be coming up from the Love Therapist on Instagram. This account, she has a lot of wonderful information about boundaries, about healthy relationships, and about communication. So I would definitely implore you guys to check it out. But what this graphic does is it shows us the different quadrants of boundaries. So we have physical, thanks Tanel. We have physical boundaries, and these will involve personal space, you know, how you are physically interacting with other people, a respect of your time and your space, and your energy. It could include touching, and that can be platonic touching, and it also could be, you know, romantic or intimate touching. Sexual boundaries, physical needs, you know, all of these things that affect your physical self, those are the things that are going to be in physical boundaries. And then we have mental, which is more so how you interact with other people and how people interact with you. So you're wanting to make sure that, you know, you are respected, that you are able to feel confident in sharing how you feel about things and what your thoughts and ideas are, but also being able to be respectful to other people in their sharing of ideas. Also talking about awareness, your self-awareness, and how you are presenting yourself to other people, and how you're also aware of what you're doing to yourself. So a lot with self-talk is mental. So next we have the emotional piece. And this is being able to feel what you feel and express how you feel and being validated in how you feel. And also with you being able to regulate your own emotions. You know, nobody else has control over your emotions. Nobody else has control over your thoughts and your feelings. All that's up to you. So being able to separate yourself from the people that you are working with, people that you're in your family, and people that you are in platonic or romantic relationships with. And then finally, we have spiritual. So spirituality can be more important to some people than not. However, it's very important that you are able to determine what your own beliefs are and not let somebody else dictate what you believe or how you should behave. So all of that is about exploring who you are, what you want your purpose to be, what you want your life to be like, what is important to you. And being able to say, if someone starts pushing, hey, this is what I believe. I respect that. I need you to respect that. I know I hear what you believe, and I will respect you with that. So that's kind of what the basic types of boundaries are. So in going on that, I do have a few scenarios for other members of the group to answer if you would like to. So if we could take down the graphic, wonderful, thank you. So this is going to include a lot of assertiveness stuff. So we talked last week a little bit about assertiveness and how it is you being able to recognize what you want, but also respecting that in other people. So I have a few scenarios. The first one is family not respecting your spiritual boundaries. So how would you guys on the panel talk to or respond to someone that is not respecting your spiritual boundaries?
That's a tough one, but I think it's important to, you know, have the conversation to say, I have this belief and I hope that you respect me and I respect you for having your beliefs that are different. So I think it's important for respect and understanding to be on both sides. And, saying, you might not understand what I believe or what I'm thinking, but I would love to tell you more about it. We care about each other. We want to build this relationship. We don't have to believe the exact same thing, but we still care about each other and respect each other as individuals, as family, or as friends. And I hope we can continue to have a healthy and loving relationship, even if we don't have the exact same religious beliefs.
Absolutely. I agree. Anybody else have anything that they would like to add?
I think that was good. Thanks, Sydney.
Mhm.
Perfect. Exactly. The biggest thing is respecting, first off, knowing what your beliefs are so that if somebody does push you, you can, feel comfortable saying, this is what I believe, and I need you to respect that. And I know it can be difficult with family members because, most families, you come up and you think you're supposed to have similar beliefs, and that may not be the case. It may not be true. So for the second one, what about if a partner that you're with is wanting to speed up the relationship, move into, more intimate things, and you're just not ready for that, but they're not willing to slow down with you? How would you handle that situation?
I think I just tell them I'm not ready. And if they can't respect that, then I'll distance myself because self-respect is the most important thing. And if somebody else not respecting you, you're disrespecting yourself if you allow it. So I think I just, distance myself if they can't respect the fact that I'm not ready.
Right. I love it.
The only thing I would add to that is, and this doesn't necessarily go so much for like sexual encounters or emotional labor, but like say you have a partner who wants to make like a financial decision, like say they want to move in together, or they want to buy like a boat, or they want to go on a trip, and you as a person are not ready to do that yet. I found myself saying in plenty of relationships, I'm not ready to make this leap, but I fully support your decision to do whatever you need to do for yourself. And I think that's really healthy because it allows the person to know, hey, like if that's right for you, that's right for you, but it's not right for me.
Mm-hmm. I think that's incredible. This idea of you do what's best for you, I'm going to do what's best for me. Absolutely. Awesome. So for the next one, how do you guys feel, or what would you guys say if someone is consistently invalidating how you feel about how they've treated you? I think this can come up with a lot of DV relationships, with gaslighting. It can happen in family relationships. It can happen in any type of relationship at work. But how do you guys handle those situations where you're being assertive and saying, this is how you've treated me and this is how I feel about it. I feel blank when you. So how would you guys handle that situation?
Oh, go ahead, Sydney.
I was just going to say, it reminded me from my section last week when we talk about the feeling like our partner has empathy for us. So understanding and respecting our opinions and our feelings. And if someone doesn't have empathy for us, that's really dangerous because they don't see the value in our feelings. They don't see, maybe they don't understand like the impact of what their actions are having. And if they aren't realizing the importance of that, they aren't valuing you as a person. They're not respecting you fully as a person. And so the risk for abuse, if someone doesn't treat you like a person or treat you with the respect that you deserve, it increases the likelihood of abuse. And so that person doesn't have empathy for you and doesn't value and see that your emotions are important. So I would say, it might seem small, like someone's just not getting you, but that's actually a really big issue that's going to be I think an underlying issue in so many other things that would just be pervasive throughout the relationship, that you would continue to have issues relating to that initial problem.
Absolutely. Janelle, were you going to add something else?
And I'll say again, when, usually when I'm doing work with people in relationships, oftentimes it's kind of how you're communicating that. Sometimes I think people might say, well, you, and so just prior to that, Brittany just explained that we are responsible for our own emotions and thoughts. So helping somebody understand that their actions are contributing to you having a certain feeling or thought it can be very difficult and delicate. And so you want to make sure that you're communicating that. I tell people, try to avoid words such as always, never, you should, you need. Just express, give examples, like giving specific examples. You know what, on this day, this happened. And also try not to let time pass. So as soon as something happens that you're uncomfortable with, address it then, because it's going to probably be easier. I mean, if you need to take 5 minutes to calm down, but make sure you don't go 2 weeks and address it or let things build up, because then now you're just fussing about a whole thing that the other person may not really understand. And so if you're kind of saying, this is important to me, the message that they may hear is, well, it wasn't important enough for you to address. And so that just kind of creates more and more conflict and difficulty with communicating. So my feedback would be, recognize when you feel as if your boundaries have been crossed, address them immediately, but also give examples of what happened. And also, again, because we are teaching people how to love us, you want to then tell them how they can correct the behavior. What do you need moving forward? And what happens next if you don't get this moving forward?
That's a great point to know. And I think it's important to know we can correct, right? If someone does something that hurts us, we can tell them that. We should be able to tell them that. I think we should also empower everyone that's watching to know when your energy is not worth it anymore. When you, especially in friendships, those toxic friendships that we feel like we're constantly battling or dealing with something, the person is just exhausting. It is not your place. It is not your responsibility to fix anyone else. As much as you care about someone, we have to take care of ourselves. We, again, like Tanel went over those rights that we have in a relationship. We have the right to be respected, to be cared for, to be understood, and we do not have to correct or fix anyone else. That we can say, this is enough, and I'm walking away for my own health, for my own sanity.
The only thing I would add to this is that, like, this is the hardest one to me out of every boundary. And I know that it says someone has treated you this way, but I feel like we do this to ourselves, where we invalidate our feelings. So boundary setting, I think, is so important with ourselves too, when it comes to invalidating our emotions. At least I catch myself constantly saying, no, that feeling is valid. Don't brush over it and say that that's not important. So I would just, when it comes to invalidating, yes, set the boundary with other people, but set that boundary with yourself too.
Absolutely. I mean, if you are struggling to set those boundaries with yourself, then that makes it all the more difficult to set it with other people. I think that's a fabulous point. So I'll have one more, and this one can go with a friend, a family member, work, mentor, anybody. But what would you suggest for someone who is experiencing a situation where someone is pressuring them to share their private information? So this could be anything, like some people don't want to share their middle names, or it could be, maybe inappropriate pictures or something like that. How would you handle that situation?
I guess I would be curious about the importance of needing me to share that. And again, if it's not aligned with my values, and if it's more about, your own stuff of mistrust, then maybe again, we don't need to be in this friendship relationship together. So I think for me, sometimes I'm just curious about, can you tell me more about why this might be important to you at this time? Like, have you seen something that I've done that makes you feel uncomfortable or insecure? But ultimately, I'm choosing not to share this information, so you can either accept it or not accept it. And, sometimes that can be difficult because we want people to be with us. And so the outcome of that could result in, me not getting what I want. And of course, this person not getting what they want. So it's a difficult situation. So you may want to figure out how to compromise if there is any room for compromise. If not, again, what will this lead to? Kind of also thinking about, if I share this, then what else you're going to want me to do that I'm not comfortable doing? And then does this create a pattern of behaviors that just have us going on this like hamster wheel, and nothing, nothing good is coming from that. So
when I think of this example, I think of like if there's something going on and it can be like triggering to you, or it invokes an emotion that you're just not ready to have maybe in a public space, or with a partner. Like, say for example, like music is very connected to me, so sometimes if I hear a certain song, it may cause a feeling that I'm just not ready to share with someone. And in those situations, you may have that friend say, why? Like, what's the deal? And that's where we're crossing that boundary. So for me, sometimes I'm okay with sharing, and then sometimes I say, I don't feel the need to explain myself. Or you can simply just name it. If it's trauma, you could say, it's related to my trauma, or I just don't like that, or it's not really the mood right now. You can kind of pick what scale you're willing to be on between saying no with no explanation or going into detail.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's important, that can shift. You can be okay with sharing something, that's personal to you, and 5 minutes later be like, you know what, I can't do anymore. Like, that's okay. And being able to, recognize that in yourself and say, number one, I don't owe anybody an explanation of anything. But of course that can kind of change depending on your relationship and what type of intimacy you might have with that other person. But you're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to think about it. You don't have to let someone force you into, sharing something that you're not wanting to share. So that's it for me. I'll hand it on back to Bradley.
Awesome. Thank you, Brittany.
And be kind of an advocate, because I also know that parents may be watching, and if they have young teens and they're like, you're going to share this information with me. And so we are telling teens essentially that you have the right not to. So that can then now cause some. So I just try to tell people, my young teens, if you're living with your parents and this is their space and they are supplying the Wi-Fi, the phone bill, those are things that they might be able to have control over, in terms of what you're posting on social media, making sure you're staying safe. That is their right as your parent. And so I don't want you to walk away from this thinking, well, I heard on YouTube or that you can't, my private stuff is my private stuff. So I want to just throw that out there, because I understand parents like, not in my house. So please be mindful of your parents' rules.
Relevant.
Absolutely. Have the conversation with your parents, what boundaries you can agree on in a mutual setting. Sometimes it can be, different per household. So thank you for adding that, Tanel. That is very important.
Yeah. Culturally, not so easy for some of us have grown up like, no, you don't get no. But so I get, yes, definitely recognize the culture, recognize your parents and what you can and cannot say to them in a way that won't get you out.
Yeah, my mom's in the living room listening right now.
I think I thought of your mom when I was saying that. That's her house, her rules. Got it. Respect
Her house, her rules.
Okay, so now we're going to move back to Tanel. Can you demonstrate how we can have conversations about potential sexual relationships?
Yeah. So again, you want to first know yourself, know your body. You may not know what all is comfortable to you, especially if this is your first experience with sex. But already have answered, if I'm going to have sex with this person, what are my reasons? What am I hoping to get out of having sex with them? What are the pros? What are the cons of having sex with this person? And so before it happens, even before it gets to that in the moment, you might say, ask that person about their sexual history. I know sometimes we don't think that that's okay to do, but I would encourage you to say, hey, we've been talking for 3 months. We may, eventually have sex in the future. I'm just curious, can you tell me about your sexual experiences? Have you ever been tested for an STI? What are your thoughts about using protection? And if it's, you know, if it's a guy wondering if, you know, asking the female, you like, have you thought about birth control? What, if so, what birth control options are you, you know, what are you using and how can I be supportive of these options? So I would just encourage you to have those initial conversations up front, even though they can be very uncomfortable. And then going ahead and say, if this is your first time, you know, say, sometimes you might want to create a safe word and say, well, you know, I'm not sure what I'm going to like. I would like to be able to say this word if it makes you feel comfortable. Sometimes people don't often hear no, they should, obviously, but just creating maybe another word where both of you feel comfortable using if something gets into you know, a zone that you're not comfortable with.
Yeah. Could you explain consent?
Yes, consent can be given and taken away at any moment. It doesn't mean that you have to even have initiated sexual intercourse. So it could be if you're requesting, hey, will you send me a picture, babe? Send me a picture of a text. No means no. Or you don't go in go in somebody's stuff and violate their stuff. So the moment that a person says stop, you stop. If they say no, I don't want to do this, you have to stop. So consent is, and even if you're involved in it, the other person can say, is this okay? Sometimes I know it seems weird, I'm going to touch you here, is this okay? Asking for permission without the assumption that it's okay to do. So I'm going to do this to you, is this okay? And if that person says no, then you don't, you stop. Even if you are in the middle of actually having sex, and if that person says, I'm no longer comfortable, we need to stop, stop. If you don't, you have just violated that person's rights and sexually violated them, that can lead to some significant consequences. And it can be touching anywhere. So I just want to emphasize that.
I think when we think about consent too, it's important to say consent is not simply the absence of a no. Consent really needs to be clear. Like if someone's not saying yes, then that's a no. If it's a hesitation, if it's a maybe, if it's anything but yes, they're not giving consent. And there's a really great video. It's not recent, but the one about tea. If you Google the YouTube video about drinking tea to understand the concept of consent, is really great. So I'd recommend if there's ever questions or you want to, giggle a little bit, but learn something, look up the consent drinking tea video on YouTube.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just wanted to bring that up. I know that we're talking about it right now in sexual encounters, but consent is applicable to every type of encounter in your life. And so I'm glad that you said it's not the absence of a no, or no isn't just the only way. You could be having a conversation about a topic, and if someone looks really withdrawn and they look uncomfortable, like right there, you're not having that person's consent to talk about this particular thing. So I just think it's important that we emphasize consent is mandatory in all settings. So now we're going to move on to Sydney. Can you demonstrate for us how we can assess our safety and ending a relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. So just again, as we talked about last week, your safety in a relationship is so important, not just your physical safety, but your emotional safety and well-being. And this is something that we want to, using all of these tools and information that we've given you around the Bill of Rights and communication and setting boundaries, is entering into a relationship and understanding what it means to be safe, but then using these tools and information to constantly reassess assess, is the relationship progressing as we want it to? Do we still feel safe? Do we still feel valued, whether it's a romantic relationship or a friendship? The more that we know someone, the more slowly that we get to know them, and have open and honest conversations with someone about hopes, dreams, expectations, the better the relationship will go. So it's much easier to, put those guidelines in place, to have conversations around things that make us uncomfortable if we've set the tone from the beginning. It's possible to do it, months, a year into the relationship, but if your partner doesn't understand or respect those boundaries, that conversation can be harder and you can feel more stuck within that relationship. So I want to give us a couple scenarios here of two people who are in a relationship and sort of as things progress. And in each scenario, they're going to be experiencing a different type of abuse and their safety will be threatened in different ways. So I'm going to kind of talk about this, and I use the names Pat and Drew, so purposefully sort of gender neutral names here. In all of these scenarios, it could be happening in any same-sex relationship or between a male and a female. So these are scenarios that we see in the community affecting everyone. So think about these scenarios. Think about whether or not you've seen this happening. Maybe you've experienced it yourself. What would you do if you were in the scenario yourself? Or what would you do if you were witnessing this and one of the people in the relationship was a friend of yours or someone that you knew? How to support them. So Pat and Drew are in a relationship. That's who we're going to be talking about for these scenarios. Pat and Drew have been dating for about a month. They're in high school. They've known each other for a few years. And the last time they were alone, Pat asked Drew to have sex. Drew was uncomfortable and refused. But Pat was pushing them and said if they weren't interested, they would find someone else. So panelists, what kind of abuse are we experiencing? I'll ask you guys since I can see you.
Sexual abuse.
Sexual abuse, yes. So Pat is trying to coerce and manipulate Drew into doing something they aren't comfortable doing. And then not only that, but then they're going to push and say, well, I'll find someone else who's interested. And so incredibly disrespectful. Is there another type of abuse there that we might see?
Emotional abuse.
Emotional, yeah. So within that realm of psychological abuse, someone trying to be manipulative and, and aggressive. So definitely we see that psychological abuse is so pervasive. It's in almost every single relationship, these things that we're saying to people and what we're trying to have happen. So Drew is being manipulated, or Pat is trying to manipulate Drew. So in this situation, what we would want to do, and again, it's a very repetitive, but it's because it's important. Drew should set boundaries. First, thinking about what sexual activity they're comfortable with and talking to Pat about that when the relationship starts. So if, Pat knew in the beginning that Drew didn't want to have sex for the first year of the relationship, and then they pushed for it a month in, we know either Pat, forgot about the conversation, we can remind them, maybe they'll apologize and just got, caught up in the moment, won't do it again, and then they're set on the right track. Or maybe Pat keeps pushing it and Drew realizes this person isn't respecting my boundaries and this relationship is not healthy because they're pushing me to do something that I'm not comfortable with. So some things there. So situation 2. Pat is texting Drew every 5 minutes, asking where they are and who they're with. Drew doesn't answer their phone, and Pat then escalates in the text messages and is accusing them of cheating. Then Pat signs into Drew's email account and checks their Facebook page to try to figure out where they are and what they're doing. What kind of abuse are we seeing?
Technology abuse.
Technology abuse, yes. So Pat is using the technology to try to control and stalk Drew, to try to gain information, and probably doesn't have much trust. We have the right and in a relationship to have privacy. Doesn't matter how long you've been dating someone. If you're married, you should never demand a password. You have the right to privacy. We should trust the person that we're in a relationship with. If you don't trust someone, I'd argue you have no business being in a relationship with that person. What other types of abuse are we seeing in this situation?
Emotional.
Emotional again, yeah. So wrapped up in that psychological abuse, Pat accusing Drew of cheating because they weren't responding is abuse. We have the right to spend time with our friends and family and do things independently outside of that relationship. And making accusations of cheating with no reason, with no basis, is unhealthy and definitely a warning sign for future abuse. So again, if we'd had a conversation and communicated at the beginning of the relationship about time apart, how often we're texting each other. If I don't answer, I'm not ignoring you, I'm doing something. And we respect that. We give them time to answer. We don't, snowball the text messages into accusations of cheating. We would have a more healthy understanding there. And maybe we communicate, I'm going to do something for the next couple hours. You won't hear from me until this evening. So we still might know generally where our partner is, and that's healthy to communicate, but we don't need to keep track of every single detail of where they are and, freak out if they don't answer a text message. We also, again, should have the right to privacy within tech, and we shouldn't have our partner, accusing us of hiding something or anything else because they don't have access to all of our social media and emails. So another situation, Pat doesn't want Drew hanging out with friends or family, saying, so now they've gotten married, now that they're married, all they need is each other. It's you and me against the world, babe. So why do you need your friends and family? What are we seeing? What kind of abuse is this?
I mean, definitely mental and psychological, could be emotional as well. Making them feel isolating them.
Absolutely. Isolation is part of psychological abuse. Keeping Drew away from friends and family is a way for Pat to gain power and control over Drew and is incredibly unhealthy. So isolation, whether it's social or geographic, is not okay. That's unhealthy. We should be able to maintain relationships with friends and family, even though we're married. Having other relationships doesn't minimize or lessen the importance of their marriage. It should not threaten their relationship. Having friends and family makes our lives better and stronger, and we should support a friend. If Drew were our friend in this situation, we should continue to reach out and support them. And maybe we understand that Drew's having a hard time communicating with us, and that Pat's a little bit controlling. So we should continue to be there for them, understand if they can't communicate quite as often as we would want to with them, and continue to let Drew know, I'm here for you, because Drew might need help leaving that relationship. I would wager they probably would. Situation 4. Pat is really upset when Drew disagrees with them in public. So you saw them out together, and Pat slapped Drew in front of everyone because Drew wanted to stay longer, but Pat had said it was time to go home. So Drew disagreed with Pat and they got slapped. What are we seeing? What kind of abuse is this?
Physical and psychological.
Physical, yeah, absolutely. And so obviously it is never okay for someone to put their hands on you. They're using violence to try to control and intimidate Drew. If someone ever hits you or puts their hands on you, we should take steps to end the relationship immediately. We should safety plan, seek help from friends, and call the police. If you see this happening, what would you do in this situation? What would y'all do? Say you were out in public with Pat and Drew and you saw this happening.
Intervene in a safe way.
Yes. Would anyone do anything else?
I think a part of that intervention would, could possibly be calling authorities and trying to remove Drew from that space if it's safe.
Yeah, Absolutely. So intervening in a safe way is a great, broad way to say that, because the scenario could be so different. Maybe we feel safe physically intervening and getting Drew away from Pat. Maybe we don't feel safe doing that, but we can call law enforcement. If this were happening at school, and it's people that maybe Pat is your friend. We would react differently than if Drew were our friend. If Pat's our friend, you could go up and say, that's not cool for you to talk to them like that. It's not okay for you to put your hands on them. Let's go and get them help and then support Drew. Whether that's going to a resource officer, trusted adult, teacher, anyone else. So absolutely. So last scenario, Pat and Drew they're married and they've moved to a new town and they move into a new house. Drew has not found a new job in this new town where they're living, and Pat doesn't want them to go back to work. Every time Drew needs to buy something, they have to ask Pat for money and then show the receipts for everything that they've purchased. What kind of abuse are we seeing? Financial abuse, absolutely. So it's incredibly controlling, using money and finances to control Drew. Again, some part of psychological abuse as well, because they're in a new town. They probably, Pat is still probably isolating Drew. They are not near friends and family. And partners should make financial decisions together. Even if one partner is better at budgeting or tracking finances, you should still make those decisions together, and that both partners should have access to funds. So those were our scenarios. Pat obviously is not a healthy partner, and we would want Drew to get help, because in each of those scenarios, their safety or their emotional safety was threatened in some way. Communication and equality are important and just vital foundations of a healthy relationship. Like we've said so many times, know thyself. We should know who we are and what we want in a relationship. We should know our rights in a relationship before we start a relationship. When we think about the rudder on a boat, sort of maybe a cheesy analogy here, but the rudder of a boat steers it in the direction that it wants to go. Doesn't matter where the wind is coming from, you can go straight into that wind if you have your rudder tracking and you're sailing. So when you know your values, when you know your expectations in a relationship, it doesn't matter what's coming at you, you can stay true to the course. You can know what you want. You know what's right for you. You make those decisions about your own relationships, and we have the right to end a relationship when we're not feeling safe in any way. So continue to lean on your support system, go to a trusted adult, or reach out to resources in the community.
Thank you so much, Sydney. That was beautifully said. So we're now going to move to the portion where we let Anaj, our youth expert, ask any questions. It can be to certain panelists or just broad in general, but the floor is all yours.
Okay, so what I did was I actually asked a lot of my friends what they wanted to know about relationships. So it wasn't just like my perspective. So I just have a lot of questions that they asked. The first one was like, how do you know someone is committed in a relationship?
You're muted to know.
How do you know somebody's what?
Committed in a relationship.
I would say, again, kind of, because I've worked with older or adult couples, and I've worked with some youth couples, I think it just depends, again, on what everybody's defined as committed. Because I think that you can have a healthy relationship and still, maybe if both parties are in agreement, have other healthy relationships as well. So I just think it depends on what the two people who sat down and had a conversation about. We are now committed. What does this mean? What does this look like? What will we accept? What won't we accept? I even encourage couples to define cheating, because everybody didn't have the same definition of cheating. So before you get into this committed relationship, what does it mean that you now have stepped outside of this relationship, this talking on the phone? So again, because there's various thoughts about that. So I just think it's just important to have the conversation with the person that you are involved with to discuss what those behaviors and boundaries are.
The only thing I would add to that is, as a youth, it's so hard to navigate that because commitment later in life looks different than maybe like youth commitment, you know? And so for me, it would definitely be a conversation, but maybe it's like, okay, I want to know if we can commit to, we'll talk at night, you know, like every Wednesday for an hour. Is that commitment to you? Or is it, you know, I want, if on Saturdays we can commit to each other to hang out and like go for a walk in the park and not invite our friends? You know, what is commitment? Is it that we make plans and you don't invite your friends to join without, you know, asking me about it? And I think it's individual, you know, maybe you're comfortable with your partner, like going to parties and maybe sometimes you're not. So it's definitely a conversation about, can we make time and will you promise me this time for us to have together without having, you know, other people join?
That's a good point. And when I think about someone being committed, Bradley, what you were saying made me think of someone who follows through with what they say they're going to do. So in all ways, like, they said they're going to call me later and they did, or if they couldn't, they let me know something came up. They're not constantly canceling plans. They're not flaking on me. They're not changing their mind. I mean, we have the right to do that, but if someone is committed, they are there for you and they're trustworthy. So I think that our actions and what we do shows a lot about, you know, what we really feel internally about that relationship, about that person.
And it's all about building trust. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't start a relationship at 100% trust. You know, you have to build that up. And it goes to what Sydney was just saying about the people following through and people showing that they're actively wanting to commit and be a part of this relationship and whatever that looks like. So I think the building of trust is super important.
Okay. Okay. So the next question was, how do you know someone is right for you?
It's a good question.
Yeah, these are intense questions.
Again, I think that you have levels of what happens in relationships, especially long term. So sometimes everything feels really good because of the physical attractiveness, or maybe they're saying a lot of the wonderful things. And then there's a stage where maybe if you are starting out as a young adult couple and then you go to college, and maybe this person's at this college and you're at a different college or whatever, and so you might have, you know, that might test your relationship, even though you went in thinking we're going to be strong and we're going to. So I don't necessarily know, other than to say trust your gut. And again, with the things that we talked about earlier, who are you in this relationship, and is this person also the person that you want for them to be for you in this relationship? So I think that's it. Does this person take you out of character that you don't know who you are? Then maybe this person is not right for you. But if you can, you know, if you're holding dear to your values and what's important, and you don't feel guilty about anything that you're doing with this person, then that person is right for you. But if you are doing things just to please this person, whether it's sexual acts that you're not comfortable with, going places you're not comfortable going, whatever that is, and you know inside you that that is not who you are, then that's probably a good sign that this person is not the right person for you.
I think the better question to ask is this person right for me right now? Because the honest answer is, I have no idea. Like, I could be in a relationship right now. I have no idea if that person's the right person for me. Like, that's going to change, and it could change in a month. It could change tomorrow. But right now, do I feel safe? Do I feel loved? Do I feel appreciated and valued do I feel encouraged to fulfill my dreams? You know, does this person support me wanting a higher education? Does this person support me going into the workforce immediately? It's the right now. And that, honestly, sometimes you could look back and be like, wow, I cannot believe I spent 3 years dating this person. And like, how did that happen? But you just got to think about the day at a time when it comes to relationships, unfortunately.
Right. And the more that we think about those things that we want in a relationship and have those important conversations about where we want to be, what are our goals, what are their goals, the more you talk about those things and have conversations at the beginning of the relationship, get to know that person before jumping into things too quickly, physically and emotionally. It's easier to hang out with someone a few times and talk about like, what's important to you? Where do you see yourself in 5-10 years? Which I totally hated those questions as a kid, but it's like thinking about that is so important, because if someone gives you a totally off the wall answer and you can say, gosh, I really disagree with that, or I'm so not there. If you're emotionally invested and you're already maybe sexually active with that person, it can feel harder to disentangle yourself from that person. So the better you know someone to start out and having those conversations, the better.
Okay, so the next question was, what's the definition of toxic? I personally, I want to know too, because I don't really think there's a definition for toxic. Like in a relationship, I don't necessarily think a relationship could be toxic. Maybe like a person can be, but I don't know.
I second that because I don't know the answer too, because I personally catch myself saying, wow, that's toxic a lot. But
Yeah,
I mean, what is that? Tanel, give me the therapist definition.
yes,
'Cause I wanna
please.
Um, yeah, so again, it's very difficult because I never want to impose when I'm doing therapy. I never want to impose my values on any couple that comes in, and so I find that people have different thoughts and definitions of toxicity. And so again, I'm just going to go back to, does this relationship take you into a place that you yourself is not comfortable with? That itself can be a toxic relationship. Meaning maybe, and so you might know, because again, I don't think people realize things change in relationships. So yes, in the here and now, you are here, and as you continue to get to know a person and start to maneuver around, you may find out other things about this person or about yourself, and then you may start to do certain behaviors that you're not used to doing. So maybe you've never been that person that like searched through that person's phone, but you're so in love and you just got to know. And so now you're doing things that's not typical and it feels a little weird and you're hiding. I think and here's another thing, if you struggle with sharing your parents cannot meet this person because you're afraid that your mom or your dad's going to read them, that might be a toxic person for you.
Yeah, definitely, I agree.
If you are uncomfortable bringing this person home to your family, think about the reasons why. That might be a toxic relationship. That's just my thoughts.
And if your relationship causes other people to have negative emotions, then your relationship is toxic.
Yes. When I think about, yeah. When I think about toxic, I think about someone who not only isn't supporting you, but is creating conflict or undermining you. So there's a level of disrespect and you're not cohesive and on the same page. So, just a lack of respect and conflict and a lack of support.
Absolutely, because I think there can be toxic behaviors that if you address them and talk about them and work through them, they don't have to get to the point where it makes the relationship toxic. So it all boils down to the communication and being able to say, hey, what you did back there, I'm not okay with it. What do we need to do to go from here? Because if you can't have that conversation, then all your relationship is built on is toxicity.
Okay. So the next question was, how do you communicate in a relationship other than the typical, what are you doing and what do you have planned for today and where are you? Like, how else can you communicate?
You mean about more about that question?
Like, just communicate in general in a relationship. Like, how do you do it? Because a lot of youth does not know how to do it.
Like, when you get stuck in that cycle of being like, hey, what are you doing? Nothing. What are you doing? Nothing. And then it's like,
No, more like, how do you communicate with your partner? Like, how do you talk to them? Like, when things are rough. Like, if you're going through something and you're acting funny, and your partner's like, why are you acting funny? Instead of saying like nothing or don't worry about it, how do you communicate? Like, and actually discuss and be able to sit down and have serious conversations with the partner.
So again, I would encourage that person to say, you know, I do have some things going on. I would like to talk to you about it. I am a little cautious because of X, Y, Z. Like maybe you might say, you know, I'm worried about how this might come out, or I don't know how to express it. Yet I also want to challenge, there are so many creative people. So sometimes you don't necessarily have to use verbal, like use the words themselves, be verbal. You can write it out, you know, or do it in a song or do it in poetry, whatever it's comfortable for you and that person to receive that. It doesn't have to be the same, let's just text about it. But I also to find other ways to oh God, I lost my train of thought. To find other ways of, again, just texting. So think about how you can just talk to that person about different stuff, but just do it. So I think, again, you won't know if this person's going to be there for you until you actually take the step to share something that is intimate. That just do it. Just share it. Just see what happens.
And like Tanel said, they might be worried about how their partner will react, but you know, if it's, hopefully there's respect and understanding in the relationship. So, you know, we should feel safe sharing, and by sharing what's going on and what's bothering us, we're giving our partner a chance to give us feedback, to support us, and that's really what we want in a loving, committed, healthy relationship, is to be able to share those most vulnerable moments and be there for each other. Whether you're, you know, 15 or 50, you should be able to share those moments. And so hopefully your partner would want to support you, and it would bring you closer by sharing something, and maybe coming to a decision or conclusion together, or processing those emotions. They could really help you talk through some of that.
so we got time for one more final question, I think.
Okay. How do you discuss sex in a relationship?
How do you what?
Discuss sex in a relationship. I got that question a lot.
Okay. So initiating sex, what was good about it, what wasn't comfortable, like this.
Like, yeah, I guess initiating. Like, how do you start that topic before it happens?
I don't want to be the first one to always answer. Brittany, what do you got?
You're the expert. But what I would say is, if it's something that you're thinking about, just come out and say it. Just say, hey, so we've been talking for a little bit and I really am thinking about having sex with you. Let's talk about it. I mean, the more direct, the better, because you can get to the nitty gritty and kind of see where you're coming from about what your interests are with sexual relationships, or, you know, what you want sex to look like for you, and they can express that for themselves as well. But a lot of these conversations boil down to just open your mouth and say it, because nobody can read anybody else's mind. And, you know, as we talked about in a couple of other videos, is doing it in the heat of the moment. You may not always make the best decision for yourself. So even if it's, hey, what are you doing at 6 o'clock on, you know, Thursday? We need to talk. That's okay.
I used to mentor these wonderful group of young ladies, and I encourage them, before you even think about, are you ready for sex, and some things that you can do before you even have that topic. One of them is, can you, and this is going to be weird, but can you look at your whole body without flinching or being upset, like like I can't stare at my whole body because I don't think I look pretty. So because those kind of things may impact your sexual experience. And there was a couple other things, but I would just challenge you again to be comfortable with yourself sexually first. And then when you think you're ready to have sex with the person you are involved with, ask yourself why and what am I hoping to happen in this relationship or change or make better by having sex with this person. Do you feel, because I know sometimes people think, well, this is going to keep this person, I'm going to be able to keep this person. We've talked about on this show before about sex and how sex can be attached to self-esteem, which is a horrible thing. So be mindful about initiating sex because you think it's going to keep a person or it's going to make you feel better about yourself. Those are my cautious tales. Don't do it to keep somebody and don't do it to feel better about yourself.
Absolutely.
Okay. I have more questions.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you all for being here today. And I want to especially thank Sydney and Anaj for joining us these past few weeks to discuss the importance of evaluating relationships. I know that we all really enjoyed having you both, spiced up the conversation for sure. Once again, if you're in need of assistance or have any concerns or questions about your relationship, please reach out to us. However, if you are in an unsafe situation, please contact an emergency number for immediate help. If you would like us to discuss a particular topic, please message us. Otherwise, stay tuned on social media to learn more about our upcoming topics of discussion. We hope to see you then.